Hey, we are live. Welcome back to Soaring Profits Thursday night live edition. We have the lovely Hillary with us. Hillary's a friend of mine that I met quite a while ago. She's wonderful, and I couldn't wait to get her on. I'm going to read this long thing because I cannot memorize all the wonderful things she's done. So bear with me. So she grew up in a small town in the Ottawa Valley. She's the fifth of 6 kids in a busy entrepreneurial family business. Always pushed against the traditional career path, sold power tools for a large global company for 8 years, traveled across Canada, hosted expert judge on Discovery Channel in 2015, Blood, Sweat, Tools. She dabbled in motorsports, sold snowmobiles, motorcycles, ATVs for a few years. And then the pandemic kind of caused her to make some changes. And then her daughter, who is a 4-year-old, wonderful young lady. So then she started helping Peterborough, our small town here, in the business world, helping entrepreneurs launch their businesses. And she's done a lot of great work in that. And now she's decided to switch again. And I'll let her explain that to you. But it's wonderful to have you here, Hillary. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words, so I'm not reading it cold. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. This is fun way to spend a Thursday evening. Right. Yeah. So I grew up in the Ottawa Valley, made my way to Toronto, decided big city life wasn't for me. So I landed in Peterborough. It's kind of a nice in between city size. And yeah, for the last 2 years, I've been working as a small business coach, small business advisor, helping people make changes and take their side hustles or their passions and turn them into a small business, or helping small businesses through the pandemic who needed help and were hitting plateaus or hitting, times when they weren't sure they were going to get through. And it was a really great job for me for the last 2 years. And it's gotten me through the last 2 years of a lot of personal changes in my life as well. And then one day I was sitting there going, I need to take my own advice and I need to make a change for myself. And I quit my job on Monday and I'm making a big change. So this is kind of fun timing to be able to talk about all of this.
Yeah. So what drove you? So you're saying that you're just kind of itching for a change, but what motivated you? Besides the fact that here you are, talking to person after person, and I get that when I'm helping people, and I start listening to the advice I give, I'm like, dude, you don't follow any of this advice at all. Like, get off your ass and start doing some things. So I get that part of it. But what kind of motivated you, and what direction are you planning on going from now on?
So I'll take it back to how I ended up doing what I'm doing. I have always had very large corporate jobs, and I've had, I think, like you read about how I've, pushed against traditional career paths. My motto, and I think at one point I thought about it getting tattooed on my body, is that I was going to break through the glass ceiling with power tools. Right. Because I was always one of the first women to do that job in whatever company I was at, or I was one of the only women to do that job. I had a daughter in 2017, and all of a sudden traveling all the time and being on the road and having to deal, I became very much more aware of the BS that I was dealing with sometimes on a day-to-day basis. And I dealt with postpartum depression and I did all of that. And then all of a sudden, March 2020 hit, that awesome C word. And it really caused me to just hit the brakes. And I decided to stay home with my daughter. And then I went through some personal changes, and I decided I wanted to do something different with this incredible skill set that I had spent 15 years building, traveling across Canada, working on some of the largest construction sites in Canada, selling tools, working with people who didn't want to work with me. And I found a position with a local nonprofit here in town that helped people build businesses. And I've spent the last 2 years coaching and honing my own coaching and leadership skills, and really working on, my empathy and dealing with and understanding, you know, who I'm talking to and how I need to talk to them to get them to their goal. I'm not just selling a product anymore. I'm helping them sell something. So I love it. And I cried when I gave my resignation. I'm not going to lie. But I also know that there's bigger and better things for me somewhere else. And that's where I really had to take my own advice, in that you need to know when it's time to make a change. You need to see those, you know, those signs for yourself, whether they're in your personal life or your professional life. And I started to see those signs in the spring. And I also started to see the signs in myself that I was ready to make that change. I have worked through my personal life changes. I've, you know, got myself settled in a place where I'm ready to make a professional change. And now I'm doing it. So I'm going back to corporate world. And I'm going to be working in, you know, more with a bunch of blue collar technicians and in more of a renovation construction kind of world again.
That's amazing. Like, I just think that it's so interesting that you, like, I'm going to go back to the empathy part because that's kind of who I am. And you're absolutely right. Like with counseling and stuff that I do, it's very hard because sometimes you see, like there was a video that Pat and I just watched where the client had a nail on his forehead, and you wanted to say, just pull out the fucking nail. But you can't do that because that's not what it's about. It's about learning who they are first, learning what their skill set is, what their mission is, and then using that to help them get to where they want. You just can't just, you know, this is what I do, go do it. Why can't you just go do it like I want to? No, you have to like coach them slowly forward, and to do that, you have to have empathy. You have to understand where they're coming from. That's amazing. And like, I've gone through the last couple of years, I've gone through like this big lifestyle change, leaving my wife in 2017 and changing how I do things, meeting Pat. Well, I've known Pat for a long time, longer than that, but Pat started being able to counsel me financially in a way that that truly has launched me. And then this 3 months ago has been a passion of mine for, I don't know how many years. Pat, have I been talking to you about it? Like,
well, I think it started over drinks, many drinks. Yeah. And it was something that for a very long time that you're like, hey man, we have these conversations that I think other people would be interested in listening to. Yeah. And we get tens of people.
They love it.
Tens of people that give a shit about what we say. But no, it's been a very long time coming, but it's been something that, you know, as someone who's watched James and the career development that he's done and what he's undergone, someone like yourself going through that now, and going into a very male-dominated career path, I would argue, right?
Yeah. I think it's funny because when you talk about empathy, I remember so distinctly the first time I worked. There's someone in my life who I consider a business life mentor. And he was a client. I sold him power tools, and he was the most pain in the ass client I had, but he was my biggest. So I was like, it was like in the movies where you see like, I'm just going to have to do whatever I need to do to keep him happy because he's going to cut those 6-figure POs, like, and buy my power tools. And I remember walking onto the plane to go to my first big vacation in years. I was going to a family wedding in the Dominican Republic, and he waited until he knew I was about to fly out of the country to send me this purchase order. And I was just like, man, this guy, like, I can't believe it. And then when I got let go through corporate restructuring from that company, he was the first person to call me and want to hire me.
Right.
And I was like, what? I can't even believe that. I'm like, why would I even think about working for him? I worked for him for 4 years after that. Right. And I realized that he was the pain in the ass because he liked me and he knew he could do it. And we had this rapport. So he really became a mentor, and he gave me my first like sales teams to manage and my first like business development, where I was like given these problem child sales guys to mentor myself. And I remember him saying, you know, Hillary, you have to have more empathy when you're on these one-on-ones, when you're coaching. And I remember getting my back up so much and thinking, you wouldn't say that to a guy.
Right.
Right. And then now I look back, I was like, no, that was really good advice. Like Jeff knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
But I was so used to fighting against, again, being in a male dominated industry. I was so used to the criticism coming at me in a very like gender oriented way that I immediately got my back up. But after going through my own experience of having my daughter and going back to work after maternity leave to a company that was all men, I was in all of Canada, there were 2 women who did my job. I was one of them. And coming back from maternity leave and having my own, I was dealing with postpartum depression. I was also dealing with the fact that all of a sudden, after being home with my daughter for a year, I was having to travel for 2 or 3 nights away from her. And I had managers deal with me with absolutely no empathy. And that was really the catalyst for me to realize that I need to learn how I can most effectively talk to people, because the way I want to be talked to isn't the way they want to be talked to, not necessarily.
Right.
So in whether it's, I think James, and, if you talk about being a parent, it's the same thing. Like I can't deal with my 4-year-old the same way I would want to be dealt with, because probably we're too similar and she'll come back at me. But so when I'm dealing with my clients now, one of the first things is I really try to get to know them, because I have to understand that what brought them to sit down to talk to me and what brought them to this point where they are ready to quit their full-time job and make this major change and open a business, or they've had this side hustle for a couple years and, okay, I think I can do this. I'm going to make it my full-time job. Or some of the hardest ones were, I lost my job with COVID. I can't go back. So now I have to do this. So learning that where they're coming from and really understanding, how they want to be communicated to and the best way to communicate with them has been an incredible journey for myself personally, because it's made me a better communicator with the people that I love too. And the people in my life, because I have to remember that I don't know what they went through that day. I don't know what they went through that month. I don't know what brought them to saying the things that they're saying to my face right now. So that's like, I went from having it be almost like, I don't need to be empathic. I don't need to have empathy. I just need to tell him to go sell more.
That's right.
To now being like, okay, you're not selling more. How are things going? Yeah. What's going on? Is there something I can do to help you? Like, what brought you here?
What I had to figure out was that there's a fine balance, though, because there are some times where you're like, you start doing that and you start saying empathetically, okay, what's going on? This is different. You're not the same that you were yesterday. Something's bothering you. And then some people will take advantage of that and keep on going that way. And it's like, no. Right now is enough. You need to stand up and start doing things. So whatever they are, you need to start doing it. And then there's other people that you help in a different way. You just have, like you said, you have to read them. There are some people that you have to be directive and you have to go, these are the steps you need to follow. And if you don't follow them, I can't help you anymore. I'm done with you. And that is the only way you can help certain people. And then other times it's all empathy. It's all touchy-feely, like kindness and like, here's your gold star and all that stuff. It really, really depends on the person that you're with. Now, you were saying, going back to the male-dominated world. So I'm in a female-dominated world. Mm-hmm. So you talk about how they talk around you, and women talk around me in a different way, because I don't know, I've been cloned into one of them a little bit. And so when you're having that fun time and you're off the books and they have similar conversations. Like the men world and the female world have similar conversations. And I think people don't notice that sometimes. Like, I'm like, they talk like really nasty about firemen and paramedic and the police officers and stuff like that. Like, if a fireman comes to our work, they're like running to the window and like, doing all the things that guys do. And I wonder sometimes, maybe they're not as in your face. Like, since I started looking good, because I haven't looked good my whole life. I just like the last 6 years. They're very like, they'll walk up to me and they'll like hit my chest, or they'll put my hand on my chest, or I've had them come up behind me and like touch the back of my pants and go, "Oh, those are really nice pants." And I'm like, this is very weird, but whatever, I'm just going to move on. Right. So like, I just wonder, that's my experience working in a female dominated world. Now that I look good, like I haven't always looked good. Before that, it wasn't like that at all. I was just the nice guy. So I wonder, is that what you're talking about? Or is it harsher, like way harsher? Which it could be.
I have experienced like from 0 to 100 in my work life. I started selling power tools when I was 25. I say that it was like my first real big career job. I got out of college, got a really good job. It got me the experience that got me into the power tools world. And I was single for the majority of that time too. And I didn't look like all the other girls. I've got tattoos. I've always had colored hair, so I always kind of didn't fit a mold that way either.
Right.
So I have experienced both. I've definitely developed a thick skin that I can have, I can have someone say something to me that can be offside, and I've developed, ways to, brush it off. I also have some really great comebacks that put people in their place really fast too. But what I have discovered in working with the majority of men is that most of the time that inappropriateness or that awkwardness comes out because they are awkward and they don't know what to do. Right. There's a level of intimidation that comes with being a woman that knows more about a subject than the person they're talking to in a male-dominated industry. So I'm standing in front of men who buy power tools for a living for some of the biggest construction companies in Canada, and I'm teaching them things about these tools. Right. So it's like a coping mechanism. But as soon as I can break through that, I found that my relationships tended to actually be stronger with them than my male colleagues. And I think that there's a level of respect that comes with the fact that I stuck around long enough to break through it and to stay there. I used to say that, like, if I could get into some of these big companies, it would, as soon as I got in, it would take me forever and I'd have to go through shit and I'd be like, whatever it was. But once I got in, it would take a TTC subway to get me out.
Right.
Because I had a guy at a boardroom table in one of the biggest electrical companies in Toronto one day, and he was not a nice person to me the first couple of times we met. He was just really gruff and just like told me I didn't know what I was talking about. And he looked across the table and he goes, "Little lady, you've turned into quite the bulldog." And he signed a contract with my company. Right. And I was like, I'm going to take that as a compliment. Thank you. Because it took, and then once I got the contract, it was there. So I think it's different, because I don't think that for the most part, women necessarily act that way out of, awkwardness or, from being an uncomfortable. I think it's the opposite. I think if I'm going to be that way with a man, and I think it's because I'm comfortable and I know that they're comfortable with me. Whereas me dealing with this weird, awkwardness with men, it's because they're intimidated and they've never come at, like, how often do you deal with a woman who knows more about a subject than you do, and it's what you do for a living?
I do all the time, but I understand. Yeah. I quite often that's the case in my world, but no, in like construction and stuff like that, I could see that being the case.
Well, it certainly sounds like both of you have been victimized. We'll have counseling afterwards, maybe over beer some night. This sounds like a thing. But no, I Hillary, it's funny you say that, because I think that there is something innately about, the male species, that there's a loggerheads. I know some of my best friends started off with "fuck you" in the schoolyard. And it was that, no. And now we're going to set a tone and we're going to move from there. Mm-hmm. if you are able to push back and you have the moxie, the guts, whatever you want to call it, to stand your ground, then you have established a foothold and you have an understanding of where that line is, and that line is not crossable.
Yeah.
And I think that all too many people in the business world, especially, for those of you that have watched this before, I'm a little less liberal in my viewpoints on a lot of things, but I think that we live in a very soft work environment where everything is kind of blown a little bit. You have to be very understanding of everybody's everything. Mm-hmm. And when you set that firm boundary, that guideline, that line in the sand, that's pretty atypical, right? So I think it's interesting that you were able to do that, and you saw that as soon as you set that and established it, what the outcomes were, right?
Yeah, and I think too, like, there are not, like, I've hired women, and I've had women hired on to work with me who didn't last and who didn't like the job, and I think it helps too that, like, I grew up, in I was always the alpha daughter in my family. And I was always the one, that went and did those things, and was the one that I always had more male friends than I did female, and I'm a very direct person. I don't like to beat around the bush. I don't like to talk behind people's backs. I used to say that one of the things that I loved most about working with a group of guys is that we could be in a boardroom and discussing, a new project, new promotion, whatever, and all just be swearing at each other, yelling at each other, not getting along, trying to figure it out. And we all walk out of the boardroom and we can go have beer and still get along. And that's very much who I am. And I'm really lucky that I found some really great other alpha females to be friends with now in my adult life who are that way too. But I think that's also what has drawn me to work in careers like this, is that I am, even though I will admit I am very left and I am very, I'm not conservative. I'm also not a touchy-feely person, and that's why, learning to be empathetic has been something that I have had to work on, because I was a very do this or, shit or get off the pot kind of person. So it's been something that I've had to actively work on.
Yeah, I think like what you guys are talking about is totally true. As I was growing up as a guy, it definitely was that you were always fighting for a piece at the table, a seat at the table. Who was the alpha? Who was the leader? Constantly. And he's absolutely right. Some of my best friends I had actual fist fights with. And then right after, like, it wasn't even long after. You're talking like minutes after, we're buddies. And the same at work, same everywhere. When you're dealing with male on male, it's really about, like, Pat and I slash each other all the time. Like, if there is something that is sore on you, we hit each other with it, because that's just what we do. We do it all the time, and we don't mean anything about it. And we know at the end of the day, he's my buddy, and I could literally, if I had to, like, I don't have to, but like, say I was stranded in Ottawa, I could call him and he'd come up and he'd pick me up. I know this about him, like,
and then make fun of you the whole ride home for being stranded in Ottawa.
It's almost like a good thing we have a podcast, because I get to do it like publicly. Shame. Yeah. Now about that though, I have stopped peeing on James, marking my territory. So like, that's one of the things that I've been working on.
Yeah.
But
it's because I punched him shortly after he did it. He didn't like the punch, so.
Right.
So you can
on his ass.
So you can imagine now, like, having this conversation with me, and you've gotten to know this little bit apart about me. So yeah. I have been single for 18 months. I am now in the point where I'm like, maybe I might start dating. Maybe I want to go meet somebody, so you can imagine what this is like for me. I haven't been single for 10 years. I turned 40 this spring, and I'm like, how do I meet somebody who doesn't want to be made fun of like I'm one of the guys?
It's true. And it's a dicey world out there as far as that sort of thing goes. Myself, I have a just turned 13-year-old daughter, and that sort of world is very foreign. It's like Mars. It's a weird world. All of that. James can attest to that. James is, I like to joke about this, that James is so much older than me, but yeah. Is there like a geriatric Tinder? Like, how does that work?
There's got to be an app for that.
There's got to be. There's got to be.
If not, that's your next project.
Right.
Yeah, profiteers out there, if there's a geriatric app for James, or maybe you're a rich widow, very rich widow, and you like this, give me a call.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So Hillary, obviously you've done some interesting things. You're currently going through a big change in your life. We talked a little bit about kind of what spawned that and that sort of thing. But you're saying that you were coaching and mentoring business now, or kind of what you were doing. Again, one of the things that I talk about a lot is finance, where the economy is going, that sort of deal. And one of the things that I often talk about is, the economic climate. And where we are right now, things are obviously not super great. I know that a lot of people are feeling it in their pocketbook. I talk a lot about investing strategies, how to watch the market, how to read the market. As of today, officially now we are looking at a U.S. recession, which I'm trying to think, James, what I think we called it about 4 or 5 months ago.
4 or 5 months ago. Yeah, you said it.
Yeah. So it's been a long time coming. These things obviously are problematic and are going to end up hitting people at their dinner table. There's a lot of people that are we're not going on that trip. We're certainly kind of more worried about putting bread on the table. Mm-hmm. Someone like yourself coaching and looking in small businesses, what advice would you give a small business right now? How to diversify, how to look at what the next market's going to be bringing? What sort of things are you looking at and saying, hey, this is coming down the pipe. You have to be ready. What's next?
So the first thing that I would say is that I don't think there's a better time to get into small business. And I know that when I say that, people kind of, what are you talking about? This isn't a time to take risks. Mm-hmm. And I really think that it is. I think that coming out of the pandemic and even going into a recession these are times when people want to keep their money local. They want to be able to support people that they know. I grew up in a small town of 6,000 people, and where my dad wouldn't let us sell chocolate bars as fundraisers, because his analogy, and I use it probably at least once a week with my coworkers and my clients, is that if I buy a chocolate bar for you from the school for a fundraiser, I'm not going to buy it from the corner store down the street. And if I don't buy it from him, he's not going to have the money to buy the flowers at our family flower shop. And if I don't have the money to do that, I'm not going to be able to put you in Taekwondo next month.
Right.
And it's this small town, local economy. And that's how I was raised. And that's still my mentality to this day. So when I look at where people want to spend their money, they don't have a lot to spend. They maybe aren't taking that trip. They maybe aren't traveling to Toronto to see shows and to eat. But they still want to do that. So where are they going to go? They're going to go to the local restaurant. They're going to go downtown. They're going to be supporting the people that they know. So, we see a lot more of social media coming now where entrepreneurs and small business owners are introducing themselves. And I talk to my clients about how important it is to have a brand that people can connect with. And a business that people can connect with, because if you can create an emotional connection, because it's either your face or your message, then people are going to want to work with you. So that's the first thing, is I think that this is the time to do it. This is the time to rent that storefront or open a home business, right? E-commerce right now, so easy. It has literally never been easier to set up an online store and sell your product, if that's what you're doing, right?
I couldn't agree with you more, Hillary. And this is something that we talk a lot about in regards to making that next step in your life. James, I rip James pretty good here about being the touchy-feely stuff, but making those changes in your life. And one of the things that I've talked a lot about is getting financially savvy. You have to be making moves. You nailed it. Recessions are the time where financial freedom is made, right? If you can put a successful business together in a tough time, when shit comes back, you boom.
Yeah.
Like the next multi-million-dollar companies in your current location are being drafted now. So what's your idea? What's your concept? You've got negotiating power. You talked about going down and renting a space. You've got a landlord that's been locked out for 2 years, can't have people coming in. They've shuttered 3 businesses over the 10 years prior, and you're going to come in with a good idea? Mm-hmm. You want leasehold improvements? What do you want me to do for you? I'll do anything I can to get you in here, make you successful, because you're going to allow me to be financially free on that real estate investment that I've put forward. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, and I think there's something to be said too about, starting in tough times and being able to make it through, is that you have the ability to really, like, I help a lot of people write business plans to go for financing, or to just create that like written roadmap for what they're going to follow. And I say, you are building yourself such a solid foundation so that when stuff does happen, you have that to come back to. So when you build a business and you create whether it's a financial model or a business model that can make it through the slower times, then it's bomb proof for later. Then there's the other side of it, is there's those customers. So, for me right now, I can maybe go out for dinner maybe once a month, but in a year and a half, maybe I'm going to be able to go out twice a month or 3 times a month. And I'm going to go back to those amazing local restaurants that gave me that one really good meal a month when that was all I could have. I'm going to support the stores that gave me that amazing service and those great products when that's all I could afford. Right. I'm going to support them again. I think the next thing that I would tell people is it's the time to collaborate. Get together with other small businesses. We're seeing incredible success, or small businesses who are taking their individual power, which might be great, and collaborating, whether it's selling their products together, putting their product, like it's creating, and if you've been in business, the term, the blue ocean. Mm-hmm. It's creating their own blue ocean, which means that they're creating their own market. They're creating themselves a niche where no one else can compete with them. So they're eliminating their competition by saying, well, no one offers these two combinations. Right. So whether it's, I've seen businesses who decide to go under the same roof. Okay, let's rent one storefront, and we're gonna work together so that customers have a one-stop shop. I've got my stuff, you've got your stuff, but then we can offer it together, or whatever it may be. I think that small businesses who work together create their own markets, they eliminate the competition, and they give their customers something that they can't get anywhere else.
Well, I think, Hillary, I couldn't agree with you any more on that. I think it's a fantastic way of looking at it as well. And one of our future guests here, a friend of mine, Montana, who's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks, she owns a business in Coburg called The Market and S'more. Mm-hmm. And what it is it's a fresh food market, no waste. And she's collaborated with all of these local producers. She has turned nothing. It was a baby infant thing that she started, and has turned it into a $3 million a year business. Yeah. Like this is collaborating, exactly like you said, allowed her to, first of all, put a better, broader foot into the market where she's able to negotiate, because she's bringing all these people in, pay me to put it on the shelf, right? Let me sell your product. I'm going to sell myself to you. You let me sell your product, but we're going to work at a term. And then she's grown this exponentially and continues to. And that's what I think is so impressive when you're able to do that sort of thing. So no, I couldn't agree with you more. And this is where I talk about the business aspect that I touch base on mostly here is financial planning, as far as setting up your financial futures, the stock market, trading. Because I think as much, like right now for myself, financially where I am, for me to go and do a brick and mortar, it's not in my wheelhouse. I don't see myself going back to that. I can make more in an afternoon trading than the gross of some of the small businesses in Peterborough, to be frank. Right.
But I think that that's one of the amazing things about, the entrepreneurial ecosystems of cities like ours and small towns, is that we don't need those brick and mortar. Starting your own business isn't like it was even 10, 15 years ago, where, okay, I'm going to get a business. I'm going to go find a storefront. I'm going to write a business plan, get a business loan. I'm going to start in debt, and this is how this is just how it is to start a business. It's not like that anymore. So that's like, if you are collaborating, like there's a really great example of 2 businesses here in town who, one did have a brick and mortar. Now they've collaborated and they're all online. So they're selling all their products, e-commerce. They don't need a brick and mortar, and they're growing and doing incredibly well and shipping across Canada now. So, it's the same thing with people going back to the office, right? Like, look at how many offices are empty right now because they're starting to discover that maybe I don't have to pay rent for 20 employees. Maybe, maybe if they can all work from home, and holy cow, in the 6 hours they work from home a day, they're twice as effective as they were in the 8.5 hours that I made them sit at their desk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, for better or for worse, this pandemic has made us really, reevaluate what business has to look like.
Yeah, there's no question.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just saying, like, for myself, again, being in real estate and investing in real estate, I've been looking at kind of moving my portfolio a little bit more to the United States and looking at commercial, mixed residential, commercial, that sort of thing, and looking at purchasing from there. And the concept of commercial real estate right now is terrifying, right? You see so many people that are turning these massive buildings that have been office buildings for years and years and years in major city centers, and they're trying to condo them, right? They're going through hell and high water to try to get these predominantly blue states, right? To try to get some variances to try to get these turned into condos so that people can live there, as we have a housing problem all over the world, right? Like in Western societies, we have a housing problem. So I've
even noticed in this area, those office spaces are now turning into like a rented office space, so that if you have that one-time meeting that you have to do in person, you show up, you have all the computers, you have all the Wi-Fi, you have the coffee maker, you have everything you need, and then you come in for the space for like 4 hours, but that's all you need it for. And then you walk away, someone cleans it, and then they turn it into a counselor space for the afternoon. And it's just like that's how they're switching it up and changing it to a more profitable a system. Because you're right, they don't necessarily need to be together. Like I both of my kids are work at home doing vastly. Like my son is programming for a company that does, like, companies come to them and ask them to make programs, and he's literally programming from home. Sometimes he's programming through his computer to a computer that's on his desk looking at cameras, which is just boggles my mind. And my daughter's dealing with insurance again from home. Yeah. So like it's wild because of all of the great tech that the tech that they developed during COVID so that we could stay connected is just outstanding. And so now people are really seeing. I wish the government would figure it out, though, because I've noticed the government is starting to pull everyone back into the offices. And I really, like Pat and I have talked about this before, I am a bleeding heart liberal. I think we need all the social programs. I think we need welfare. I think we need all that. But I don't necessarily think we need all of the people sitting in the office. Like, they could be doing a lot of this stuff from home and have like a couple of people, maybe, in a small office, that go, hey, how you doing? Fill out this form. Let me help you out. Go to that computer over there, and Johnny will be right with you,
But that brings up a really interesting point, and I deal with it too. And it depends on the service, and it depends on the sector, because then it becomes an accessibility issue, right? Like, so I have actually put together proposals. None of them have been successful as of yet, for programming to help call it a certain age demographic who maybe have lost their job because of COVID, or their position isn't available anymore, and to help them upskill and reskill. Because, like, I think of, my mom is older, she's been retired for years, but I think of that, like, sort of middle demographic of, okay, I've never used Zoom. I haven't used Microsoft Office since it launched 25 years ago. I don't know how to format a spreadsheet, those sorts of things. So then it becomes an accessibility issue of, or do you have access to something with a camera so that you can Zoom call whoever you need to Zoom call? Mm-hmm. And so I think there has to be a middle ground for people that, to be able to access services. Even myself, I'm a small business coach. I still go into the office because there are people who still want to come in and have that conversation, and who don't have, the skill set or the technology to be able to have a Zoom call with me.
So
that's what I'm saying. Like, on the site, there would be like a tech person that would go over the computer and click it, and then you'd do this, and you could have that whole conversation. Now spreadsheets and stuff like that is vastly different. I guess you'd have to teach that online. But I'm just talking about the interview part, the conversation that you can have. Doesn't necessarily have to be in person. Like you could coach someone using this system that we're using right now, right?
I was hired, interviewed, hired, onboarded, and spent the first 10 months of my position as a small business advisor sitting from this desk right here.
Right. Yeah.
I hadn't met a single one of my coworkers until I had been in the position for 10 months. I didn't know what anybody looked like outside of here. Like when I met them, they were all like, wow, you're taller than I thought you were. Like, you know, and one of my coworkers lives 3 blocks from me, I found out later.
That's so funny.
Never met them.
Yeah. So you were saying that you're writing these proposals, and so I tend to be like, these are proposals to the government, I imagine, for funding.
Yeah, most of the time trying to get funding to run programs. Yeah.
Okay. So in my experience, I've written a few proposals over the years. It's an interesting process to say the least.
Yeah.
Can you give me some insight into what kind of feedback, or just like, was there much? It just
no. So that is one of the problems with this, the bureaucracy of government funding, grants, whatever it might be. I'm also on the board of directors of a festival here in town. Okay. And so I help write all the grant proposals and the funding proposals for that as well, because we are a nonprofit registered charity. And that is one of the things, is there's never any feedback. You spend hours upon hours, like some of these proposals and applications. Like I did one application for a government program where I had to take a course to say that I was certified to write the grant application. So I spent 8 hours on the computer listening to, and that's how much I retained it. I can't even remember what it was about. So, in order to be able to say that I was allowed to write an application, and then, no, sorry, you didn't get it. Right. So, there isn't any feedback, and I get it. I don't know how many applications they got. I don't know, what stipulations and that's one of the reasons why I have never, looked for a job in government, because I can't handle that.
Well, and that's something that, like, fundamentally myself, as more conservative, I struggle with the fact that the government has no business in that business. Like I struggle in a big way. So what my model would be in that situation is that, how can Hillary go to these organizations and say, I can bring you a demographic of people that are fantastic, they're diverse, they're all of these things. Now you need to help me help you. Yeah. Right. And that through the private sector is far more efficient and effective in my viewpoint. She disagrees.
She's deciding whether or not she disagrees.
Right. Yeah. So I see both sides of the coin. So right now, my position that I just resigned from is provincially funded. Right. The ministry pays for my job and for the center where I work. So I see both sides of the coin. I see, that the red tape, like literally, like I remember taking a screenshot and sending this to a friend who actually ironically works for the provincial government. It's the Department of Red Tape Reduction. Like that's an actual department under the small business, the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. There is a sub-department called the Office of Small Business Red Tape Reduction. And I was like, are we living in a Monty Python movie? Like, that's what it sounds like to me. And he was like, yeah, that's a real office in my building. I was like, what? So I see that. And I see how, things can be so much more efficient with, in the private sector. And here we're going to go, here we're going to go. But then I also have experienced how narrow the private sector can be. And how, and how the private sector is, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it, is probably one of the reasons why we have the underserved demographics that we do. Because the private sector can be narrow-minded and can be very profit-driven. And they're going to go where the profit is. That's their job, is to go where the money is and not necessarily where the majority of the people are. Right. So I can see both. I love what I do, but I hate all of the reports I have to send into the ministry, and I have to do it because I know that nobody reads them. When I do these huge long reports about what I've been doing with all the money they gave me, I know no one reads them, but I also have seen how, narrowly focused private sector funding can be. So I get both, and I've experienced
the argument that Pat and I keep having is that I get it. Private sector is sometimes more efficient than the government, and the government needs to like cut back on all that bureaucracy to try to like a lot of it is they're so afraid of someone getting upset with them that they have to put in all of these safeguards, and that's a lot of the stuff that I deal with when I have to do write things and do proposals and stuff like that. But what I worry about, say, because we talked about what if welfare became a privately funded thing. The problem I have with that is that then it's a business. Then they will be driven to make a profit, which will take away from the people that are accessing it, and it will. They will. If say there's someone who's on fentanyl and isn't a good risk. They're going to be on it for 10 years or 20 years or 100 years. A private company is going to not service them, right? So that's why I think that we still need the government to do some of these really important things, but we really should go through and go, let's not, we don't need a whole council to sit there and talk about a proposal for like 14 months and pay them $1 million so that we can do a proposal. Let's just have some smart people go, you know what, this is going to work. Let's try it. Like, I don't know why we need all of these big meetings before the meetings. It's just wild how some people just want to talk and talk and talk and talk. It's like, can we act at any point? I just
get a podcast.
So I don't want to knock our healthcare system because I absolutely love our healthcare system. And I feel very lucky in a lot of ways to live here. Some ways I'm not. I have a mother who has been on a waiting list for surgery through the entire pandemic and is now half crippled because of it. So comes and goes. But I feel like this, for-profit versus government, I think all we have to look at is dental care.
Right.
And, as someone who has been lucky enough to have benefits for a lot of their career, it hasn't been something I've had to worry about for the last 15 years. But when I was 18 years old and needed my wisdom teeth out in a hurry, and my parents were small business owners, I had to dip into the very tiny college fund that I had saved myself to pay for my wisdom teeth, because that's what it was. But when I needed my appendix out, I went to emergency. They took me up to the operating room. I was there for 3 days and I left and didn't have a bill. So, both of them could have killed me because these were infected and so was that. But I had to pay out of pocket for these. So that's like when I think about, privatizing, that's the first thing I think of.
Definitely people around right now working good jobs that have that impacted wisdom teeth that are infected and painful, and they just can't. Yeah. It's am I going to feed my kids or am I going to get my teeth done?
Yeah.
So I absolutely agree, and it's because it's privately. Part of it is like Pat says. Pat has this whole idea about how insurance has driven up costs, and he's not wrong. So that's part of it. Like, there's no way that it costs that kind of money to pull it. Like the amount of time it takes them to pull out a wisdom tooth, there's no way it costs that freaking much money. But he says, right, or to clean. Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah. But the way he puts it is, well, insurance will pay it. And the majority of people, well, not the majority, well, yeah, the majority of people have some sort of insurance and it will get paid for. So when Joe, who doesn't have insurance, well, sorry about your luck. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That's what everyone else is paying,
So a little background on that is that, so I was in the healthcare business, and we had a physio clinic as well as nursing staffing and that sort of thing that was going into people's homes. And I got my first kind of rude awakening to the insurance-based payer system. And that is what the Canadian healthcare system is. It is an insurance paid, i.e. Canadian government becomes your insurance company, and they have set rates for everything. So when you are insured with Sun Life or XYZ, whoever you decide to go with, they negotiate through terms what they are willing to pay fee for service, right? Well, they do hundreds of thousands of them. And when they don't negotiate with power, they negotiate with a position that this service needs to be done. And it's usually, especially in the physio business, it's because of a multi-million-dollar accident claim. right? So for instance, like acquired brain injuries, we did a lot of stuff like back to work functionality and that sort of thing. So they would have $2 million of liability for an auto claim. Where do you think that $2 million went? Well, we laughed and went, thank you, right? So, but the guy who doesn't have that insurance, who gets hit by a bus walking downtown, and the guy drives off and there's no insurance for him, he's looking at the same fees, right? And this is where I'm saying is that if the public sector gets out of the insurance business, you're allowing free market things to drive itself. So that demands competition. So if you were to look at the insurance businesses that run in Canada, there's basically three. They have multiple names, they have multiple entities, but there's three. That's a monopoly, right? You've got three entities that work together to make sure that they keep rates feasible to what they feel feasible in their risk analysis. And that's where I'm saying is that if we're able to drop that, and I know that everyone gets worried about like two-tier healthcare and that sort of thing in Canada, but I hate to say it, we've been going to it for 25 years. It's just coming now. Like if I had the opportunity now, again, my 13-year-old daughter, she plays rugby. She had a pretty good black eye here a couple of weeks ago. We're like, well, do we want to go to the hospital, right? Could it be a concussion? And it was, we're not sitting there for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm in a position where financially I can pay $150 and I go in there and I do this with a physician at home, that's what I'm going to do. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? And our system is going to go to that. And Hillary, obviously you don't know this, but the profiteers, that's what we call our people that follow us here. My father passed away here a year ago, and I was very involved at the healthcare system. And my mother was a nurse. I have much love and respect for all of the hardworking people, but the system is broken. It's on fire. It's a dumpster, and it needs to be smashed to shit and then rebuilt. The problem is that it's a bad word to say private sector in healthcare. And that's where
it's profit. That's when you hear private sector and when you hear, privatization, it immediately goes to profit. All they're going to want to do is make money. But I think I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying that that's generally when I have conversations with people about this kind of thing, that's what it is that it's going to profit. That's what they're thinking. And like, it's funny when you said about the insurance fees, I remember going to my dentist for the first cleaning, like since COVID, it had been 2 years, wasn't going anywhere. And the first question they asked me was, do you have insurance? And my response was, why? What does it matter? Like, is there a different rate if I don't have insurance? Like, are you going to charge me $250 a tooth versus $125? Like, why does it matter? And I told them I didn't until the very end. I was like, oh, by the way, here's my insurance card. I forgot to give it to you earlier, just to see what would happen. But I think that, there is something to be said. I think that people have this concept of two-tier is that it will then become inaccessible for certain kinds of people. But I said about how my mom has severe arthritis and scoliosis. She went from taking boot camp aerobics every Sunday night with her partner to now she walks with a walker, and her mobility and quality of life has dramatically decreased in the last year and a half, 2 years. And she's been waiting. And in the entire time she's waiting, we can't visit her, because if she finally gets a call for an appointment and she shows up and has COVID, she goes back on the wait list. So we can't visit her. So she's also living this like mental health challenge of not being able to see people. So I do know that like, if there was an opportunity for my sisters and brothers to be like, okay, we're going to pay for a surgeon instead of you waiting. Absolutely. And in my mind, that's going to free up a spot on the wait list for someone who can't pay. But I think that the general consensus of a two-tier is that the bottom part is going to be left out, instead of it freeing up the space for those 4 or 5 people in emergency who could pay to go somewhere else. That's now going to shorten the wait time in emergency. Otherwise, and this definitely does not sound liberal of me to say this, but it really does. To me, it's creating space for the people who can't. So I think that it's a mentality, and it's a dirty word, like you said.
So my only worry about that is that, sure, I get that would free up space, but then you're going to take doctors. Like doctors are going to go to the private sector before they'll go to the public sector. Like
so the public sector has to pull up their socks and pay.
They might go there to learn. They might go there. Yeah, no, in the business world, you got to do that. But they might go there to learn, but they're definitely not going to go there to stay. So you'd be constantly having a change in doctor. You'd be constantly having to have your healthcare reevaluated. And I just think that you would lose. There would be definitely a two-tier system. Like the three of us here probably would be able to go access that other tier, and it's great, it's lovely, it's wonderful. I'd love to be able to do that for all my family. Mm-hmm. I think it's a wonderful thing. But then there's a large amount of people, especially now with recession and COVID and stuff like that, they won't be able to access. And if we're taking all the expert doctors, the expert surgeons, the expert radiologists away from the public sector, away from that government run thing, I think the level of healthcare won't get better. Although, it'll free up space and waiting times will be shorter, but then you're gonna see a lesser of a doctor. I don't know if that makes sense.
But James, what you're seeing now is that you're seeing the brain drain of the 90s. And for those of you that don't remember what that was, for instance, I had my uncle is a physician down in Virginia. And he had a practice in kind of a northern community. His family lived up there, born and raised, small town, 20,000 people. And they were living the dream, resort community, living a great life. And the whole medical system started pivoting. And this is 30 almost years ago, probably 25 plus years ago. And what it was is that you had these physicians that were saying, you can't cap me because I'm providing a service 365 days a year. If there's a woman that needs to go into labor, I'm coming off the ski hill and I'm going to deliver a baby. And I work 12 months a year, 365 days a year, but you're going to stop paying me in October. And that becomes simple economic processes come into play where now you're ascertaining somebody's labor, their time for free. And that's problematic. And this is where I struggle a lot when it comes to economics around profit being a bad word. Profit's not a bad word. You just have to figure out how the system works that profit into creating a functional system where you're hiring more nurses, you're hiring doctors, because instead of becoming a doctor in Canada now, you're going to become an engineer. Mm-hmm. Why am I going to get capped at $200,000, $250,000, have a list of patients that I can't manage? I can't see them all, right? Their care is not, it can't even be my fourth issue. Like it's so far down the line now with our system. I'm going to go become a computer engineer and walk 3 or 4 years later and be making the same amount of money.
Or I'm going to leave Canada and I'm going to go somewhere else to be a doctor, right?
So that's where I'm saying is that we have started this erosion 25 years ago. We just have to realize that we're there. It's already happened. We're just lifting the veil of what's coming. And until we get mad enough about it, and really stomp our feet and go, hey, we want to go back to a functional healthcare system. It's not going to happen. It's just not. Why would they? There's no political dynamic for it to happen. Like all through COVID, and God bless them. I was raised by a nurse. God bless nurses, right? I got a doctor in the family. They were heroes. Great. Now they're taking 12 hours to see my loved ones, and I go, unacceptable. And they go, we're heroes. And I go, this is where we got to get back to let the market dynamic come back and go, no. You're getting paid $90,000 a year to provide a service. This is a service-based business. And that's the problem where we are right now is that that's broken. How do we fix that? I think we got to go back to a profit model. Everyone's broken.
Yeah. I think that, there's a lot to be said about, the treatment of our medical staff. And I think both of you both have medical, people in your family. And yeah, there's no doubt they were heroes. They made it through like the worst times that I think any of our generations have seen. And, if you want quality coming from the private sector, if you want quality, you have to pay for it. If I want quality staff, I have to offer a salary that's going to get quality staff. So, okay, public sector, figure it out.
Right.
You know, if you don't want nurses to go into private nursing, if you don't want doctors to move out of the country, figure out how to pay them properly.
Right.
I'm not saying that everybody should be making, you know, $250,000, $500,000 a year, but like any other industry though, like any other industry, if you want quality, like I negotiated my package at my new job. They wanted me because of what I was bringing to the table. So I negotiated my compensation package. Right. Same thing. If you want the quality providers to stay in Canada and to work in the public healthcare system, you have to pay them.
But what? Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is that what would be what would be wrong with a physician making $5 million a year?
No, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm just saying that in order to keep them. So what James is saying, that if we had a 2-tiered, no one would want to work in the public side, because why would they, right? Mm-hmm. You're always going to have the people who are there because they want to be there. You always have lawyers who work for legal aid. You're going to have lawyers who work pro bono cases, but then you're also going to have the lawyers who don't touch anything, you know, that isn't whatever. Huge. So you're always going to have those people. So you have to find a way to like foster a culture that makes those providers want to stay in the public tier, I guess is what we're saying.
Yeah, I was going to say, like in the nursing field and the group home field and all those fields that are like that, the people who get into it aren't necessarily like, we all love money, but they're not actually getting into it for the money. And I think if you can form an atmosphere where you respect it, where what you do is appreciated, where you can make a change, make value, rise up in the company, or give a suggestion without being knocked down, I think you would find that there would be more nurses being successful if they didn't have to like run off their feet and have 30 patients that they're following solo. You know, if they didn't have to do all of the things that they have to do, and now they have to make sure I'm wearing a mask, and they have to make sure that I have been vaccinated, and they have to make sure that all this other bullshit that they should have nothing to do with. Their job is to heal people and make sure that they're safe and all that stuff, and all this stuff that they add, and they're not getting the gratification, I think, you know, of the good job they're doing. They're really being used a lot, you know. The one hand we say they're a hero, and then the next hand we fired a whole bunch of nurses just because they didn't get vaccinated. Like it makes little sense what our liberal government, which Trudeau can, I don't know, he can take his haircut and go anytime now. What they're doing makes no sense. They say that nurses are heroes, and then we throw them under a bus. You know, it just makes no sense. And I think if we had have appreciated them, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in now. If we had of like, you know what, you're right. Right now is a really tough time. We're going to get people in there to help you out. We're going to make things easier for you. But that's not what they did. They made it harder for, you know, the house was on fire and they threw gasoline in it. But, you know, I know you're already overworked and you're already, you know, at your limit. You know, it's already tough times. We're just going to take like 30% of your staff. It's going to be fine, though. Go ahead. Ridiculous.
So, James, I would argue that's by design, right? So we did the same thing with policing. The only one we haven't hit yet is firefighters, but they're with fluffy cats chasing them up trees.
We did it with teachers.
Right. So this is what we do. Anything that is governmental run is they are going to take their turn under the bus, because for the other 50% of the public, and I hate to say it, is that the Canadian government in Canada is the largest employer of people in Canada. That I think that's criminal. That should not be the way ever. The government should not be the biggest employer of people. So what I'm saying is that when you are a governmental employee and you're making a fantastic living, because you are, if you're making $100,000 a year with very little overtime, like most of my cop buddies, most of my nurse friends are all right around that 6-figure salary. When you are a 40% higher than the national average, you're going to take your turn in the barrel for just reason, right? If you are taking money and your service sucks, you deserve your turn in the barrel. If you go to a Service Ontario and you have to go to the DMV and you wait for 12 hours and that person behind the desk is making 6-figure salary, you have an expectation of service. If you go to a private sector and that person's making $20 an hour, your expectation of service might be a little bit different.
Okay, but you're saying it's your time to go over the barrel because your service sucks. It's not because of that nurse. It's not because of that doctor. It's because of the system. So instead of saying to that nurse, okay, we're adding hours to you, we're adding patient load, we're cutting this, we're adding this, instead of fostering a culture where the service can get better and changing the system, right? It's like me being a sales manager in a private company and I'm managing a sales team and I tell the guys, you haven't made your sales quota, so I'm adding extra accounts to your listing, or I'm going to cut your, whatever it might be.
Yep.
You fix the problem so that they can sell more and they can do their job. These nurses went to school because they wanted to be a nurse and wanted to do a job. Yes, bonus that they make almost 6 figures or they make 6 figures, whatever, but they're not able to do their job because of the environment around them. So they're the ones being told, you don't have a job now. So it's not their fault. So I feel like we're targeting these individuals and we're targeting these providers for not providing a service, but they're not given the tools to do it. And they're not put in an environment where they can do it. So, it's got to come from above in any situation.
So this is what my healthcare business was based on. Is what we were doing is we were taking skill sets and we were driving them down the food chain. And I did it in 2012 and 2013. And now you're seeing the public sector do it. So you had a caseload where an RN would manage a registered nurse, again, university educated. They would come in and they would handle an upper tier, more severe cases. Okay. Then we had RPNs. RPNs ended up doing the vast majority of our hands-on work because they were $25 an hour, right? You're driving a skill set down, and that goes to free market economics. If you're in a situation where $65 or $70 an hour an RN is going in and wiping bums, that's a very poor use of your resources. And this is where I'm saying is that you have hospitals now that are trying to figure out a way to best use resources. That's why we're seeing all of this big push for PSWs right now.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Huge push for PSWs right now because they are the lower food chain, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry if that's insulting to people, but fuck you. Okay. But like they're the lower food chain in the healthcare industry. And then they are going to end up.
Please don't send me hate mail. I don't want to read it.
Cancel us. Cancel us. But that's what it is. So what you're doing is you're actually seeing market dynamics take over in the public sector. That's what I'm saying. This has been coming for 25 years. It's going to get way worse before it gets better until people, this is where I fundamentally struggled with the hero stuff with the medical system during COVID. I fundamentally it was so fucked up, is that these people themselves are fantastic people. I'm sure I have neighbors, right? I have all these people that are fantastic people. But as a system, you're broken. So if you're a cop and you like to shoot black guys, you're a shitty cop, right? You got to go. If the system is bad, it's got to be broken. And that's what I'm saying is that we have to have these conversations. And you thought we were going to argue a lot more, didn't you, Hillary?
I did. I'm very disappointed in this whole evening, to tell you the truth. I thought Hillary would yell a lot more. Patrick would get that vein going that we see sometimes in his forehead.
I feel in my bones that there are, if I was to come back, I feel like we could find those topics.
I think so.
I really do.
2.0. No.
There.
No,
I know of like 3 topics I could throw on the table right now, which I'm not going to. But I know those 3 would be like, I'm just going to sit back here and watch. But
I know the Pope's in Alberta. What are you guys doing?
I heard he's in Alberta. He's saying sorry to the natives, as I recall.
Well, so the thing that I saw today, and this is again just jumping off on the tangent.
Well, here we go.
We tend to go.
This might have been one of the topics I was going to throw on the table.
We'll dive a little bit. No, but so what we've got Pope Francis, who's obviously, for those of you who don't know, who's made a tour to Canada here, the first of his papacy, coming to Canada and doing part of a reconciliation process with the Native community. And there was a clip that I saw today where he was given a ceremonial headdress by the elders of the community. And I hate to say it, but these wildly crazy far lefties are up in arms that the elders gave him this after coming here. And I thought to myself, it's like, then why would he apologize? Like, it doesn't matter what he says at this point. It's just up, right? So arguably Pope Francis, and again, maybe, but probably didn't touch any kids. But here he is as a representative of the Catholic Church trying in good faith, and he's getting martyred for it. So I struggle with that. Like, that's just like, okay,
I've never heard that our Pope might have touched children.
No, I'm just saying, I'm generalizing that he didn't. So I don't, just saying.
Go ahead, Hillary.
I think that this is the term figurehead comes to mind, and the efficacy of figureheads. Like, I feel like this were, if the Queen were to come tell me something right now, I'd be like, yeah, that's nice. What are you going to do about it?
Sure.
And that's kind of how I feel about the Pope. I come from a long line of ardent Irish Catholics. It ended with me. But I just feel like the people who are up in arms about this visit and what's happening are the people who are saying, like, that's nice, but what are you going to do about it? So what are the things that can be done to help, the survivors and the people and the children of the survivors and the grandchildren of the survivors and the children that still haven't been found? What are you going to do about it? It's really great that you've said sorry and that you're here driving around, but what are you going to do about it? And that's kind of how I feel about it.
And I don't disagree with that in a lot of ways. I again, understanding how figureheads work. Like you said, if the Queen came over, I'd be like, who are you? I have no ifs, ands, or buts, right? But nailed it. But my issue arises is that here we are in every ceremony that we have in public settings anymore, where we're, making land claim statements, right?
Acknowledgement.
Sorry, I can't even get the word right because I don't do it. I with all due respect, I think that it's wildly silly, right? There's no other situation in humankind where nations around the world do that.
Yeah, there is.
Where though?
New Zealand.
So the only other far lefty crazy fucking country in the world.
I'm telling you, there are land acknowledgements, and there are New Zealand has a visitor's pledge that you take when you go there, that you acknowledge the land and the people that were there before you, and you acknowledge the fact that they are the caretakers of the land, and then when you leave, you will not leave your mark.
But isn't that the same thing as what the Pope's doing right now? Like, so I have a problem with land acknowledgements too, and this is my reasoning behind it. So I'm going to go to your house, Hillary, today. I'm going to go in right now, and I'm going to say, you know what? I really like this place. It's nice. Can you go out back for me? I'm going to have some friends over. And then I'm going to stay there for like 2 years. And every morning I'm going to wake up and go, I'd like to acknowledge that this is Hillary's house. Very thankful that Hillary has given us the house. And then we're just going to keep on fucking using it. That's exactly what all these government things are doing. All these teachers are doing. All these schools are doing. It's just like what you're just claiming the Pope did.
Yeah, Hillary.
Did you stick me under the back porch and kill some of my kids before you moved in?
Absolutely, because that's the only way I can get you to leave.
You only
but
have.
How is that making it better for you?
Yeah. So my issue.
How does it make it better for you? Come at me. I gotta have a fight today.
That's it. So my issue is that what happened here is not unique anywhere else around the world. Like, we have warred as people, as humans, for millennia and will for millennia to come. And I understand that we signed documents and treaties and didn't abide by them. That's a tale as old as tape. Like, we've got that's how things were. That's unfortunately how things are. We're 250 years now. And so you got the apology today that everyone was really wanting. And they're like, fuck that. It's not enough.
It's not the apology.
You're not going to give Toronto back.
So it wasn't the apology that everyone was wanting.
What was it?
It was the action everyone wanted. not
but
the
what,
apology.
but what is
the same Trudeau's doing right now, walking around saying, I'm really sorry this happened. And then, you know what, we're going to put a pipeline through your.
I feel like the fact that the three of us are having this conversation, that we're sitting on a real place of privilege because we're able to have this conversation because none of us went through this.
Totally.
Like none of us went through this. So I feel like I have a bit of a unique perspective of this. My grandparents were Baptist missionaries on the Six Nations Reserve outside of Brantford in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
They converted Indigenous folks to Christianity. And I have a real hard time talking about it. But at the same time, they took orphans in, and they stopped kids from being scooped up. So it's kind of you're right. Yeah. But I was very privileged, and I'm going to use that word to be able to.
Hate it.
Well, I was privileged because not everybody has the opportunity to do what I did. I took a course, and I took a 12 week. It wasn't 12 weeks. It took me a lot longer. It was free. It's offered from the University of Alberta, and it's called Indigenous Canada. It's free to anybody who has internet and a computer and the ability to watch videos and read. And
I'm fucked.
It opened my eyes. It really opened my eyes to the fact that, you know, we can say people have been fighting for millennia. We can say that, like, oh, this has happened around the world for as long as humans have been around. This fucking happened 50 years ago. This happened 60 years ago to like our grandparents, like people my age, their grandparents. So it's not that like we're talking about something, you know, even the War of 1812, whatever. No, we're talking about something that happened in the 1950s and the 1960s.
Yeah.
Like my mom remembers kids that she grew up with being taken away.
Yeah.
So like, I think to say that this is going to happen and it, you know, it didn't happen to us and it's going to keep happening. I think that we have an opportunity as a country to change that dialogue and to change that mentality and say, you know, no, we're not okay with this. We're not okay with what happened, and we're not going to let it happen again. Like to say that we're just going to, oh, it happened and it's going to keep happening. I think that's a really, really narrow point of view.
Well, no, I don't think so. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying,
I know that's not what you're saying.
I think us going on their land that we stole, like I am in firm agreement. I've seen some of these treaties and went, yeah, this is your property. I don't want to give them. So let's be clear. If my land is on territory, I don't want to give it up. Right? I don't. I'm not, like, it's hard to. So it's very easy to me to say that we should be, you know, honoring some of these treaties, but at the same time, I don't want to give up my house. So I will say that I'm anyway, but I think that it's necessary that we need to stop just every time it's, I'm really sorry. Or every time it's like, I'd like to recognize this, but we don't do anything about it. Recognizing it is not making change.
No, I agree.
Talking about it. Yeah. So, but then we don't talk about it. You know, we say it's, I can't think of any native, like Ojibwe, like this is the Ojibwe Nation land. I'm sorry if I'm getting this wrong. I struggle with names. Everyone knows that. All the profiteers know that. I do it all the time. I struggle with the language, really. But so I say that, and you would hope that would promote good discussion after that, but it doesn't. It just falls on deaf ears. It's like everything else that, you know, the guy, you know, at the front goes, so there's coffee at the back. There's, you know, we're gonna talk for this long. We're gonna do that way long. I'd like to recognize that we're on the Ojibwe Nation. You know, the fire exits are here, here, and here. You know, if you need to go to the bathroom, go back there. It's all part of that now, right?
But okay, so then this is what's going to bring it. This is what'll bring it back to how we got on this topic, and is that there was a ceremony and people. What did you call it? The very far leftists. How they were really upset. Yeah. It's because that's all we're doing.
Yes.
We're just talking. And it's all these white people standing around talking about it. And it's like it's nothing's being done.
No.
So
okay, so and I get where you're coming from. I can see your logic through what your argument is. But what would we expect to do? Like
clean drinking water.
There you go. There's a start.
I don't disagree, but I've also, so here's,
or access to mental health,
access to education,
access to medication, access to proper food, access to, there's so many things, man. We talked to that one.
There are people who live within 2 hours of us who don't have clean drinking water.
Right.
Who can't drink their tap water.
I don't disagree.
There's 2022.
That's wild.
But what I'm saying is that, so in history and looking at recent history, is that there has been absolutely rise and falls of communities all across our nation. Mm-hmm. And I mean communities, whether they're lumber, whether they're mining, whether they're whatever, that established, failed, and had to disperse. Mm-hmm. So if you had a De Beers mining contract on your reservation and you were being paid to have that, and they poison your water source, that becomes a failed community, and we have to now look at what that looks like, whether that's relocated.
If that's, I don't know that happened, but if that did happen, they did not put the company on their reserve. The government would have forced the company into the reserve.
And we've taken all the other land and said, here, you can have this.
Yeah.
But we're not going to help you with the infrastructure. We're not going to give you all of the other things that all of the other communities around you have. And, plus we're going to take this and we're going to take that. But so, when someone says to me, like, what can we do? Mm-hmm. It's right now, there are children who don't have access to, proper education. There are families who don't have access to medical care and to food that's affordable, and they can't drink their water. So, we're not asking, I'm not saying that we're asking for the moon or, a whole bunch of extra infrastructure or anything like that. It's basic things that, and when you don't like that word privileged, that's when I'm like, I'm really friggin' privileged that I'm in a house that I own and I can go to my tap and drink the water, and I can take my daughter to the school down the street where she receives an incredible education. Whereas people who are living in their communities elsewhere don't have any of that.
So I would argue, Hillary, that you came to a community to facilitate that. You didn't stay where you were born and raised.
I've always been in a community because I'm white. I've always had the opportunity to have clean drinking water since the day I was born.
I don't know that. So that's where I disagree with you. That's where I'll part ways. I don't know if it's because you were white. It's because of where you were born. I get that. It's because of the way you were raised by your family. It was the opportunities that surround you. I think in this current environment, if a Black person or a Hispanic or anyone moved next door to me, they would have every privilege I have. In the past, when I was 20, different story. Right now it's different. But you're right. So if my family has lived here their whole life, and all of a sudden my water is poisoned, okay? I get the idea of not wanting to move. Mm-hmm. I probably would move, but that wouldn't happen here, Pat. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That wouldn't happen.
Where?
Let's look at it. Did happen. What was the little town?
Walkerton.
Walkerton. A cousin of my ex-wife's baby died because of that water. They fixed it immediately, and also paid some sort of settlement to a lot of people because of it. And we're years. What happens is that our Liberal government, Justin Trudeau, which is the only people that seem to care when there's an election, come out and say, oh yeah, we're going to make sure everyone has clean drinking water. They haven't done fuck all. I fucking hate Justin Trudeau. Have I mentioned that?
So how do you offer national autonomy and then do all this?
What do you mean? Explain that. I don't understand.
I would argue that the nation of that has been identified by these different bands, they are separate as a nation. They are in and of themselves.
They're not separate as a nation because we, in our treaties that we made with them, our Canadian government made with them, gave them certain assurances. And we're not following through with any of those.
But they're self-governed, right? So on territorial lands, they're self-governed.
with prejudice, because the Canadian government can walk in and go, we're going to put a railroad through here. And you know what? The mine over there, we're going to dig that up. And, you know, you guys are going to just sit back and we're going to deal with that. And if you don't like it, we're going to send in our Mounties. So you're not right. But Pat, you're not right at all in that situation.
But they do that with the 407, right? You know, when infrastructure comes through, they come in and say, hey, we are appropriating this land. We're going to pay you X value, and it's coming. So
if we poison your water, we're going to fix it right away.
Yes.
No, and Hillary, I agree with you. The water situation is awful. It's terrible. But like, I don't have to look very far to look into the United States and go, an entire million populace of people has been poisoned with lead in their water for a very long time, and no one cares. So is it a uniquely native problem, or is it just shitty government once again fucking everything up? Boom, boom. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying is that people can be shitty.
Yeah.
Right? People can just be fucking awful human beings and be like, nah, it's your fucking problem, right? Yeah. So when you look at lead in a water source because they're like, hey, we're going to turn the valve off and we're going to use this stuff now because it's poison. Is it uniquely native? I struggle with that. It's not a uniquely native problem. It's just a piece of shit problem.
No, it's not a uniquely native problem, but the speed in which it's being fixed, I believe, is a uniquely Indigenous issue for Indigenous Canadians.
I also think that that they won't brush off. You know, we have to help Walkerton, so elect us and we'll go help them. But they do for the natives every time.
Yeah, it comes up in every election and nothing happens. So that's again goes back to that talking point of like, let's have all these figureheads walk around and talk about how sorry we are and how shitty things are. I know, I'm sorry. You can't drink your water. And, you know, it's $11 a gallon to bring in with your water. I know, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Can I fix it? Oh, let me go to the Office of Red Tape Reduction.
100%. 100%. See, Hillary, you and I knew we were going to agree with a bunch of stuff tonight. And that was it. 100%. I couldn't agree with you more, is that when figureheads get in play, it's a problem. My issue was with the Pope situation is that what I believe it's doing, and I think a lot of people have learned a very valuable lesson in dealing with how to deal with the cancel culture, because I would argue that that's what that has become, right? Is that I'm just not going to apologize, right? I'm already on the cross, right? You're going to crucify me either way. It doesn't matter what I do at this point. I'm just not going to do it. And I would argue
hollow apologies.
Well,
yes.
Like if I'm in a relationship with someone and they screw up,
right,
and they come back and they say, sorry, I did that. Okay, bye. No, I'm not going to be okay with that. You're not going to be okay with that. So why are we okay with our politicians doing that? Like they're hollow. There's nothing to come. Like they're not doing anything about it. Or if they are, it's like going back to the bureaucracy of just like, let's see how many years it takes to do a study to like get to the point where we can then send out an engineer and then they're going to put their stamp on it. And then, you know, then it's 10 years and an entire generation has not had clean drinking water.
So Hillary, here's, we're getting about that time, but I'm going to leave. I'm
going to saw me throw the glasses on.
Sorry?
You saw me throw the glasses on, did you?
Right, yeah. That's so we can see how long we've been doing it up in the corner.
Yeah.
Like, you got to squint. Yeah. But so, Hillary, if you were in a situation, and this is a figurative, but it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. If you were in a situation where the drinking water was poisoned, would you and your daughter remain there?
If it was my only option to live.
No, but I'm asking. So you're going to poison your child, or
I'm not poisoning my child because we're not drinking the water. I'm having to find other alternatives, pay extra.
Right.
And if it's the only place I've ever known, all of my family are there. Yep. I have cultural and ancestral ties to that place. And I don't have accessibility to what I would need to move. Then what are my other options?
Well, I would argue, and again, you said earlier in this conversation that, you're come from a good Irish Catholic family, right? So myself, as well, good Irish Catholic family. We left because the potatoes went really, really shitty on us, and we got to get the fuck out of Dodge, right? So we got on boats by the bajillions, and we're like, adios, muchachos. Yeah. I'm just culturally appropriating everything tonight, by the way. So
yeah, I've noticed that.
We got on boats.
You're trying to hit a trigger here on Hillary, and it's just not working. I don't know. I think she's a little gun shy.
That's what we're doing. That's what it's all about. But that's why we left, and we came here and we poisoned the natives.
Well, you came here, and you know what? In the beginning, you were treated like slaves. You were treated like the low of the low, and not you, but Irish people were treated very poorly at start. You know, it was hard to get a job. It was hard to live, and you know, so that did happen for sure.
But we left.
We're on this topic.
We left.
Yeah, but it's different. It's not the same, really. It's not, because no one went to. Well, maybe the British people. I don't know, but no, right? I don't have an answer. I don't know how it relates.
That's what I'm saying is that
I don't know.
There has
I
to
don't
be.
know. I think you're both lovely, lovely people.
Thank you, James.
James is
I'd like to have a beer with both of you.
There you go.
So we can have these deep conversations, and we definitely have to get Hillary back so we can talk about like Roe versus Wade and women's stuff and all that stuff. But we're not going to do it right now because I do not want to see Patrick die. I like him. I appreciate him. And we're probably going to go do some golf soon. And, you know, I don't want to go alone. So
somebody's got to go with you to babysit.
Somebody's got to go with me. Otherwise, it's just me all by myself in a ball, and that's no fun. It's like my sex life. So anyway, Hillary, you've been a delight. We're going to have you back. All the people that we love, we have back. You have some interesting viewpoints that I love. I think that you know so much about business and libertarianism. See, I don't know the English language. All of a sudden, I turned into Biden. I don't know how that happened. People.
Just opening it up now, aren't you, buddy?
I know. I'm just opening it up now. Anyway,
so Hillary, at the end of all of these conversations, whenever we bring somebody new on, James has got a little catchphrase when he leaves. I've got a little catchphrase that I leave, and we always do this where we spring it on the person right before we do it. But so he's going to sign off. I'm going to sign off, and then you've got to come up with like some inspirational words of wisdom, and then we go off. So James, if you will, dear,
let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
Folks, it's a pleasure as always. Let's make some money together, guys. Hillary?
Look after yourself, and you'll have your hands full.
Ah! That was